Welcome to the Oh So Spurs podcast, where today I'm going to be trying to convince you why Solanke is going to win the Golden Boot. And I'm going to give you three key stats throughout this podcast, one at the start, one in the middle, and one at the end, that back up my argument. And by the end, you'll all be believers, trust me. And to try and convince me otherwise, we have the regulars back with us. We've got Si. How are you, mate?
Hi, mate. All good, Jim. All good.
Good. Johnny, how are you?
Very good, Jim. How are you, mate?
Doing well, thanks. And we've got Deej.
Good.
How are you, man?
Doing good.
But we've got a new face you'll probably notice today, and that is Simon. And Simon is a Bournemouth fan who's going to be talking to us about Solanke today. But how are you, Simon?
Very well, thank you. Looking forward to this. I can certainly give you some hints and tips.
Thanks very much. We're going to get off to a positive start with my belief that Solanke can win the Golden Boot. Permitted Erling Haaland sprains his ankle mid-season. But yeah, Simon, we'll start with you. Can you tell us a bit about your experience watching Solanke grow through his career at Bournemouth? Maybe touching on a bit about what he's like from a personality perspective as well, if he's a popular figure or more of a kind of insular figure that sticks to themselves. And throughout all this, we'd love to get your view as well on the polarising debate of whether you think he's £60 million spent out of necessity and overspent necessarily against what he's really worth, or whether that is a true valuation of what he's worth in the Premier League at the moment. But I'll pass over to you, Simon.
Okay, I will take that in no particular order, but I'll take the first thing in terms of personality. Dom's great. He's a real team player. He's really part of the community within the club, both on the field and off the field. Very popular with other players. So he's not one of these insular kind of guys that doesn't integrate very well. So I'm pretty sure he will integrate pretty quickly within your unit. So I wouldn't worry about that. In terms of his journey at Bournemouth, one thing that I think encapsulates any player is the formation in which they play in, who the manager is and what tactics they deploy, and also who else is at the club at any given time in the striking position. So in reverse order, since Dom has had the freedom to fully express himself and be the number 9 at AFC Bournemouth, he's been brilliant. He had a huge scoring season in the Championship, and he followed that up with the Premier League. Now, obviously, when we played under Scott Parker has a certain way of playing, and Donny Iraola has a different way of playing. And Donny Iraola's way of playing is much more fluid. It frees up the number 9. Dom was often deeper playing under Scott Parker, so he wouldn't be in scoring positions as much. When, obviously, he was here under Eddie Howe, he was the third string striker. We obviously had Callum Wilson and we also had Josh King. So he didn't score many goals back then, and Eddie had a different way of playing and would often deploy Dom as a kind of winger as opposed to his natural position as a number 9. So there's a few examples, but what I would ultimately say is the last season isn't just a fluke. It's because the way Iraola plays and sets up, he's able to be in the box more often and in an attacking position more than he has in a lot of previous seasons under other managers. So he will do it again. And I think the good thing is that your formation and the way you set up is pretty similar to how Iraola sets up. So he is a good fit for what you're looking to achieve.
Jim, you're on mute, mate.
I'm on mute there, so I'll cut that out. So can you tell us a bit more about then the typical goals he scores? Is there a big variety to his game, or is it very specific in the way he plays?
I think let's start with the negative side of Dom. Is he can sometimes miss some goals when you're closer to the goal. He can also sometimes try and do a little bit more than he perhaps should in the final phase of a move, perhaps pass on to another player who might be coming into the box behind him. That aside, the term all-round striker is often overused, but Dom can score with his right foot, his left foot and his head. So he can do it all. He can score from outside the box. He can score from inside the box. But what you really gain with Dom is his intelligence in a formation. He can work and support in so many different ways. And a long time ago, a few years ago, I used to say to a lot of people that Dom Solanke is the most natural replacement for Harry Kane. And I'd often get laughed at because it's Dom Solanke. But actually, when you look at what he does and what he integrates within the play, he will probably release players like Son to do things that he's actually really good at that he hasn't managed to do a lot of in the last season or two.
And what I'll do then, Si, is I'm going to lead other side. I'm going to lead this on to you a bit. You've done some research around Dom as well. And just before you do that, I'm going to give you a stat. My first reason why I think Dom has a chance of winning why he will win the Golden Boot, and that is his ability to stay fit.
Yeah.
There were 38 league games last season for Dom, obviously, and he's played in all 38 games, which is pretty much the opposite scenario of what we have had in recent seasons with our striker options since Kane left. So,
And to back that up, I look back at the seasons with Bournemouth all the way back to when he was at Vitesse, and I think he's averaged 33 games a season at Bournemouth. So that's across the whole time he was there. And he played in the mid-20s for the season he was at Vitesse. So he's not had any significant period out of the game since he's been playing, really. He's had the odd injury here and there, but he's had nothing major that's kept him out, and certainly no regular injuries like we've seen with Ritchie, where he's been super unfortunate with that hamstring of his that he probably overdid at the World Cup at that time that he's not come back from. So, yeah, the stats certainly back that up.
Thought the medical team hasn't gotten to him yet, though.
Yeah. But in the Championship, Simon, there's obviously significantly more fixtures players have to squeeze in over the course of the season. What was his record like then? Was he someone you could rely on to play 2-3 games a week, or was he a player you rotated to protect in that side?
Absolutely. No, he's very prolific, very able, very fit. He's very rarely had significant injuries. Don't blame me if he gets one.
There it goes.
It wasn't my fault. But no, every level, since he's been given his chance to be the top number 9, you can't really question him. And what you get with Dom is incredible effort. He'll get stuck in. He'll track back. He'll pick the ball up deep if he has to. He's a real all-round player and a real grafter, which is, again, connects back to what I said about what Harry Kane used to do so effectively for you. It wasn't just about putting the ball in the net. And Dom is not the same level as Harry Kane when it comes to putting the ball in the net. But if you look at his all-round ability, and perhaps now with Harry with his recent injuries, if you were to compare, I'd say Dom is a fitter version of the current Harry Kane when it comes to his ability to join the dots and help players progress beyond him. He really gets that, and he's brilliant at it.
Yeah, and that was something we picked up doing some background research on Dom when we signed him. Was a criticism was he was too generous with his teammates in the seasons he didn't score many goals. He's almost always looking of who he can play in or who he can help or who might be waiting for a pass from him rather than taking perhaps a bit more of a selfish direct run and waiting for someone else to put it on a plate for him.
I think, Jim, if you look at his heat map for last season, it's very red in and around the middle of the 6-yard box. So Iriola's obviously been coaching him to not do as much of the running down the channels and to be a bit more selfish about getting into the box on the end of those low crosses and cutbacks that come from the wingers. And that sort of shows as well when you compare the assists between Solanke and Watkins. Watkins has got a much higher assist rate because I think Solanke's being asked to play that direct out-and-out number 9 and not being asked to contribute as much maybe down the channels as Watkins. And that will suit us down to the ground in Ange's system because he wants his wide players to do that wide work with the cutback. So you'll get Son and Decky and whoever else is playing on the wings doing that work. And I think that stands up.
Yeah, he's also not afraid to try something out. In the game, we were 3-0 down against Luton, and he did an amazing drag back turn, from 7-8 yards out, and then put the ball past the keeper. He's very able to do quirky, clever things as well. He's a very intelligent player, and whether that's by himself or whether that's bringing in other players. So yeah. I'd imagine that. I mentioned Son earlier. Kane and Son had an amazing connection, and I don't think that'll ever be beaten for what it was in terms of its fluidity. But I do think Dom will offer a lot to Son.
Yeah, like you've touched on there, so the stereotypical goal which Ange Postecoglou goes for seems to be one that would accommodate Solanke's stereotypical goal, but we can't rely on that every week to be the goal we score. The stereotypical one is, like Si said, it's either Werner or Son on the left. They cut in really close to the byline and they whip in a really low cross into the 6-yard box. And you want a striker who's going to be there consistently to tap it in. Or Johnson does that very well. We become a bit predictable at times with that. And what we find is all other opposition has to do really is say, if I can block the direct runs from Son and Johnson, who aren't players blessed. Well, Son's not best with the pace he was to go and just beat a man and do that anymore. And Johnson's not a type of player who's got the, skills and dribbling ability to often dribble past his man. So if you block those two guys off, they're not going to get to the byline and cut it in. So you need a striker who does what Kane did, which is dragging people away from those guys, holding up the ball really strong, and then letting them make direct runs and passing it on to them.
He's also not afraid to have a pot shot or take a player on. I mean, in the home game against Man United, which was 2-2, he showed that and took a shot from distance. So he's got the surprise element. So he's willing to have a shot from distance if that opportunity comes up.
Yeah, and that's definitely something we do need as well, particularly because we struggle to break down teams of a low block. So having someone who can, at the moment, the only player who can get around that for us is Pedro Porro, really, at the moment. So having a second player who's got the ability to do something from beyond, 10 yards is great. And I saw a lot of criticism around, and Si, you did some stats around the XG. You've got some stats around compared to Watkins, right, as well, that you're prepared.
Yeah, I mean, his XG is pretty much around his goals. It's just under 18 XG. He scored 19 goals, so he's about the same. He's on the money. And Watkins was slightly better on the XG. But there's some interesting stats around accuracy. He had 76 shots last season with a 50% accuracy rate, which I think backs up what you were saying there, Simon, that he's not afraid to have some shots that might be a little bit more risky, whereas Watkins' accuracy is 6% higher. But the conversion rate that he's got, so he's got a 25% conversion rate from his number of shots, which is higher than both Richarlison and Watkins. So that tells you he has slightly fewer shots. There's less shots on target, but of those shots that are on target, he converts half of them. He converts 25% of his total shots. So that's quite a nice stat. So he's got a better finishing rate than Watkins.
And I'll give you another stat, guys. Top goal scorer in Europe for 6 years, if you combine the 6-year period in the final 6 years in Europe. 2 top scorers were Messi and Ronaldo. Ronaldo had a worse XG conversion rate than Solanke has. So basically where I'm going with that tongue-in-cheek comment, and Solanke has a better XG conversion rate than Erling Haaland. So where I'm going with this is what the stats show. It's a harder skill and a more important skill to put yourself into a goal-scoring position than it is to take the goal itself. And Solanke is very, very strong at putting himself into those positions. Whereas I think what Spurs fans can't get our heads around is we've been watching Son and Kane play together for like 3 years, who are freaks of nature when it comes to taking goals out of nothing. And we watch a normal inverted commas Premier League finisher come in, and we watch Haaland as fans and we go, can't believe we can't bury that. Son and Kane would have buried that, because we've just been so spoiled from that elite level of finishing. But those players' XG was just obscenely out of the graphs in terms of how well they convert chances. But that doesn't mean Son is going to outscore Solanke. Son might only get himself into 10 goal scoring opportunities in a year and end up with 14, and Solanke might get himself into 30 and score 20. It's better to be that way around.
Yeah, and I think that connects to your value proposition. Is 65 million a lot of money? Now, of course, he's a Bournemouth player. No Bournemouth player's worth 65 million quid. But the XG stat and the fact he's now Premier League hardened, he knows what to do at this level. He's played against the best defenders. He's managed to get around a lot of the best defenders. He's managed to find space against the best defenders. He knows how to put the ball in the back of the net. So I think 65 million is a reasonable price based on what alternative options with XG like that might cost from top European leagues.
Yeah. And Deej, you've done some research as well, right? And I'll pass over to you for that before going in with my second reason. It's kind of the third, whilst I believe he can win the Golden Boot. Go on, Deej.
All right. Okay, so a lot of the stuff that I've looked at with Solanke has been really positive in terms of how I think he can fit into Tottenham's system. I'm going to go against a little bit of what I said last week when I said that Kulusevski as a potential 9 wouldn't necessarily need to be aerially present to be good in Ange's system. And while I still believe that was true, and I think that there's a potential that he could have done that, I think that having that kind of ability to switch up how you play and like how your goal scoring chances are created, like you mentioned earlier, Jim, is really important. And one thing that stood out to me is that Solanke has scored some absolutely ridiculous goals from headers that I don't think many other players are putting those away. Even someone like Richarlison, who's 6 foot tall, is still 2 inches shorter than Solanke. And while that doesn't seem like a lot, when everyone else is like between like the 5'10" to 6 foot margin, having those extra 2 inches can let you get to those balls that maybe like Richarlison can't. So that will allow us to be able to utilize someone like Pedro Porro's ability a lot better, who's really good at getting those crosses in from like the edge of the 18 and can connect to someone's head. And when Solanke is one of the tallest players in the box, it'll allow him to connect on those much easier than someone like Richarlison, who has to be a bit more aware of his position relative to the other defenders, which makes it so that the crosses have to be a bit more pinpoint. Another thing that I like about Solanke is his pace. He is fast, to use the technical term. His top speed is somewhere around 36 kilometers an hour, which is up there with the fastest in the Prem. I think at one point in the season last year, I think it was at the end of September, he had the fastest run in the Premier League. He was overtaken by some random defender, Mickey van de Ven, at some point in the season. But
never lost.
Yeah, exactly. But like that gives you an idea of how fast he is. Like when it takes a bit for someone like Mickey to overtake him for fastest sprint of the season. And another thing that I like a lot is not necessarily about him, but about the way Bournemouth play is Bournemouth under Iraola have went from like a more back foot approach under Gary O'Neill, and you can back me up on this, Simon, or let me know if I'm off base, but a more back foot approach under someone like Gary O'Neill to being way more into pressing, kind of like Tottenham is under Iraola. So much so that they ended up tied for the most turnovers leading to goals in the Premier League last season, which, considering that it took them, I'd say, a good 10 games to get Iraola's system correct, is ridiculous. And just watching how Solanke was able to fit into that system so well. The goal against Newcastle comes to mind, where the ball gets passed along the edge of the 6, I'd say, to the goalie, or from the corner to the goalie. And I'd say an average striker would probably just let that ball go. But Solanke chased down the ball, forced the mistake, and got an easy tap in for it. So that kind of player is someone that will just thrive in Ange's system, because we know how much we love to press as well. So having someone who's coming from a system that is used to their players pressing all the time is something that's super invaluable.
Yeah, and he's got significantly better pressures per 90 than Richarlison and Watkins.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so he's got 3 per 90 better than Richarlison, 2 per 90 better than Watkins. And he's got a really good success rate of 32% on those presses as well. So that, compared across the rest of the Premier League for the forwards, is a really, really good indicator. And that means he's going to be coming through as fit as well. So, you know, you can't do that for a whole season and then lose your fitness in the summer. So he's going to be coming fit. He's going to be understanding the need for pressing. And I think he's going to fit into the system just perfectly.
Yeah. And you took one of my reasons there, D, just to and Sai as to why it was actually my final reason to talk about today. But I'll replace it with another stat, because there's loads against the guy. So the other thing was he'd scored 2 goals, I believe, which were forced errors from that intense pressing from the front. Given that Spurs went from the lowest pressing team in the entire league under Conte to the highest since he has left, I think it's Areola's style of football with an even bigger level of intensity. Hence, every one of our players, Simon, seems to pop a hamstring every other day. But when it's working, it's brilliant. And it sounds like Solanke's hamstrings are made of tough stuff. So hopefully he can survive a season with us. But I'm hoping we can go from 2 or 3 goals from mistakes to 4 or 5.
You've got to stop tempting fate, though, in this, you know.
I know.
Well, I joke not. We've actually got a professional physio coming onto the pod in 3 weeks, because I am forecasting the inevitable hamstring to pop on someone.
Yeah.
Just hope it's not him. You can have Lo Celso, gods of hamstrings, wherever you are. But I
was just going to pick up on one thing that Deej said there, and I think I touched on it earlier, is his work rate. and in the right kind of system, and that's why he fits so much. He's so good at that. It's one of the best bits of his game is his work rate. You won't ever see Dom Solanke and think, Christ, he's being a lazy git today, or he's not putting a shift in. He'll always put a shift in. He'll always have a go. And I think for any fan of any football club, that's gold dust. And if your striker's doing it, it's even more valuable.
Yeah. And I'm going to give away my final stat if I do this, so I won't. But I'll do that in a minute. But before I wanted to give you, Simon, before we move on to the second half of the pod today, which is going to be about the Bayern Munich game, which Johnny was at. And we want to get his insight into the return of Harry and Eric Dyer and the atmosphere and the general culture around the ground then, and any other things. But Johnny, do you want to add anything on Solanke as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting listening to what everybody's had to say, especially Simon, obviously, with his perspective and a much more experience in watching him and seeing the growth he's had. One of the things that I thought was interesting, which I don't know if anyone's mentioned, but I think it's something that we've come across before in terms of Ange. We all understand that character is a really big factor in terms of recruitment for him, the outlook of the player, the ambition of the player, how much they want to come to Spurs. And there's an interview that Ange did with the Men in Blazers pod a couple of days ago, which is really interesting and insightful. And talking about Solanke, maybe it was in press conference actually. He's talking about Solanke's coming over adversity, and it's something that's quite common to Ange's sort of reflections, and I suppose his philosophy is how you learn when you're up against sort of difficult times. Spurs had in their first season under Ange, obviously a flying start, but then they had all the injuries and suspensions and stuff. And when Ange has been asked to reflect on what the side of how they've progressed, and he's kind of emphasizing how much the squad have accrued experience and learned to deal with those difficulties. And he was very much emphasizing that with Solanke, because obviously with his roots, his origins at Chelsea, and then with Liverpool, you kind of think he had his only senior cap for England when he was much, much younger. I think it was only about 19 or 20. Now, I think there's a strong case to say that maybe it's again a little bit of a slight or a prejudice against so-called lesser teams that he didn't get more caps more recently with respect to Bournemouth, because he's obviously, as has already been discussed, really proven himself, certainly last year in the top flight. And it's a bit like, for me, whenever Andrew was talking about Vicario, who had kind of done it the hard way in his career in Italy, not just kind of hit the ground running from day one and it's been plain sailing. I thought that was interesting. Again, as Simon mentioned, his intelligence and his very much being part of a team. He's not a sort of prima donna or anything like that. So that's kind of what, in addition to all of the sort of statistical analysis and I think completely legitimate points about how he fits into the team. And I really like the thought of him bringing something back into Sonny's game under Ange, which we didn't get to see last year. I think that just as a personality, it's something that is quite is something I'd be really, really hopeful and really positive about myself as a Spurs fan. The other thing, just from watching I watched a video just of his 21 goals from last season earlier today, and as I was watching, I was really struck by, I suppose you can see it's a player who is kind of at his peak, the confidence that he has, the strength that he has. He's obviously a big, powerful guy, but he's got great balance for somebody of his kind of physicality. And the range of ability, the touch that he has in many of those goals, he has a calmness. Now, I'm sure, obviously, they're not including the clangers in these videos, right? But I mean, no doubt we'll see a few errors along the way. It's bound to happen, right? But what he can do when he's able to execute his armory, it is a really wide range. And I thought, wow, I didn't really appreciate, I suppose, just being a fan of another team that's so invested in my team that, how versatile he is. And really, it's, I think, very, very encouraging for us, because it's something that we haven't had. And there's a lot of things that he could do that actually wouldn't. Obviously, Kane is unbelievable player, but there's aspects to Solanke's game that Kane doesn't have, not least you just pointed about the speed. So I think 65 million is a hell of a lot of money, and obviously the fact that he's English adds on quite a bit of money to the price tag. But given the alternatives out there, I don't think, especially Premier League proven, the only other really obvious one was Tony, and I think we've all be pretty, much on the same page there. That there's not really, especially from a character point of view, but there's not really anyone arguing from this pod that we chose the wrong option between those two. So I'm really excited, and I think he could be a great match. It's great to have somebody who's that experienced who goes straight into the team, because all of the other signings are about youth. And it's brilliant to have Bergvall and Gray and Mikey Moore, and it's super exciting. But to have somebody now who hopefully can cement the England place that he maybe deserved before. He's got a lot to play for individually as well as for the team. So, yeah.
I was just about to say that about the England point. I think that's a massive thing that was related to why he, in his contract renegotiation, inserted a top six, 65 million price tag, because any other team in the Premier League wasn't able to bid for him, basically. It had to be one of the traditional top six. But the England thing on two levels is interesting, and I mentioned Son earlier, but the other is that he did play with James Maddison during his early England career, and they know each other very well and get on very well. So there's another little element which makes it quite interesting. And the way James Maddison tends to play, if I compare to how maybe Dom Solanke would connect with players like Semenyo, and they would then follow into the penalty area, and then Semenyo would score. Dom was involved in a lot of those very intricate moves in the latter half of last season that helped us accumulate so many points as we did. So the way James Maddison tends to play and the fact they know each other, there's another benefit there. So I think a lot of Tottenham fans don't understand the intricacies and joined up elements of what Dom Solanke will bring your team in a positive way. So even though this is a golden boot conversation, it's the support for those around him and his ability to join those dots to improve those opportunities for those others who are coming from that three that are behind him.
Well, I'll tweet my statement. Go on, mate.
Just a quick one. Sorry, I was listening to View from the Lane earlier on, and a related point to that they made on there was that Maddison will definitely benefit from having a consistent number 9 that he's playing with week in, week out, rather than chopping and changing that front line all the time. The understanding that he'll build there will be a real positive if he's in for 38 league games, and I think you'll probably find that when Solanke plays, Maddison will definitely play,
Yeah, and also having someone strong as Solanke taking up some of that responsibility from Maddison. When we saw last season, because we didn't have that striker to do it, we had to put Son up front, he's not a physical guy who's going to carry a ball past, push someone off the ball. So we said to Maddison, you sit deep, you get past the ball around just above the halfway line, you turn with it and put a through ball into one of the wide players or Sonny, like going for a run. And he was just getting boshed off the ball because he's just not a strong, physically strong guy. If you have Solanke in there who's grabbing the ball and just, keeping someone at arm's length, I think it allows everyone to get forwards and to play those balls. But that leads me on to the third reason why I think, and I'm going to tweak it a bit, he will have most goal contributions in the league. That's goals and assists combined, all right? We'll go for that instead, because he sounds like he's much better at that than Haaland in terms of the assists. But the defensive contribution of Solanke, so our Achilles heel is very much set pieces. Our centre-backs are excellent ball-playing centre-backs, but Mickey in particular is quite average when it comes to aerial ability. He's nothing special in that area. Other teams seem to be exploiting this regularly. We realised when Kane left suddenly, having that big number 9 in the box when you need to defend a corner can be as equally important as having them in the box when you're going to try and score a corner. I'm going to ask you this one. Did Solanke contribute to you defensively? Is that something you noticed?
Dom is your front post man. That's all I can say. And he's very effective at it.
Yeah.
So the number of times that a cross would come in and it would be him that's the first player to the ball. So it enables your centre-backs to do their job and focus on the attacking players that are coming into the box, because you've got a reliable tall bloke at the front post who not only, if the corner's crap, can dribble it and find the pass, he can also just head it and get rid of it. So, very reliable in that position.
Great. That's good to hear. And can you explain to us this celebration and this orange pumpkin mask thing he wears? What's going on with that?
He's a huge anime fan. So you may know that obviously at the end of the season, he didn't obviously get into the England team. So he went on a big jaunt to Japan. Hence, obviously, the graphics that you used for his video when he joined Tottenham. So obviously, that is one of his favourite anime characters who I cannot remember the name of because anime is not my hotspot. But that's basically what it is. So you might see him now and again using a different mask or doing something interesting which connects to his Japanese anime love, which geographically speaking, from a commercial perspective, is actually pretty good for you guys. So your commercial department thinking, we've now got Korea sorted, we can crack Japan with Dom and his anime.
Interesting. Yeah, I like it.
Just marching east. I was just looking at Johnny then when he was, I can't remember the anime name. I'm thinking Johnny's on that. He must be all over the anime.
No, Pikachu's not anime, is it?
No, Johnny's into the other genre of anime in the adult form. We'll leave that with you, Johnny. So there's also one of the things I think you've made me think of as well, Simon, is I never even thought of Solanke as a potential option for us, even though he seems to fit the bill. And I think we touched on Tony. But I think we were so clouded by Tony in the media being, Tony's on this, is there for the taking. Everyone look at Tony. He's the best English striker available. Go get him, go get him, go get him. The media just never put any focus on Solanke as someone to even consider. And therefore we just...
You want me to answer whether the media know what they're talking about all the time? They actually don't. I always look at different teams and the patterns they play based on how players will fit. And ultimately, this is why Dom just fits you so well. And Tony does not fit what Tottenham do. He just doesn't. Ivan Toney is brilliant at what he does, and he's great at doing it at Brentford and wherever he ends up. If they play in a similar way, he'll be great there. But we all know that different managers set up teams in different ways. And ultimately, the best comes out of those players when they're given full freedom to be who they're best at being. We've all had players that, square pegs in round holes in all our teams in the past, and then they might move on, and then they're blooming amazing because they get put where they're best at. So I think ultimately that's why Dom fits. And I think he could win the Golden Boot, especially if Haaland gets an injury. I do think that's a possibility.
There you go. I've converted one. Well, you probably actually already thought that, to be fair. And so just before we lose you for the second half of the pod, just wanted to talk quickly about the mental health charity that you're helping with and setting it up. And just give you a chance to put it out there to anyone listening as well.
Yeah, so a brief story and history. So sadly, about 4 years ago, a Bournemouth fan sadly took his own life. There was a huge outpouring of emotion, as there often is on social media, and that was lovely. But I thought, how can we harness this supportive emotion before the event instead of after it? So I set about talking to other fans and saying, look, we should set something up where we can support people as a first port of call and use the power of the love of our football teams to start a conversation about mental health. And that's what we did. So cutting a long story short, we've now done that. We've got fans that share lived experience. We're trying to basically work on the principle of an 80-20 rule, that if we can use the power of football to help someone out 80% of the time, hopefully they won't need to go down other pathways that sadly some people often can do. We have or are in the process of setting up what we call the Talking platform, which is to enable us to get some funding to help other initiatives at other football clubs through their fan bases. So we've expanded. We've got Talking Royals at Reading. Talking Hatters at Luton is soon to start. So if anybody wants to set up something similar in their fan base and they want some help to do that, please get in contact. We've got a website at talkingcherries.org.uk, and we're on Twitter, as I still like to call it, at Cherries Talking, and also on Instagram.
Well, look, we'd if we can be a part of that and have a Talking OSO Spurs, we'll talk about it after the pod. But we'd love to do something like that. So anyone listening, if it helps, everyone does things different ways, but if it helps you to have a chat about any, you don't even have to talk about that directly with us if it doesn't help to talk about that. But if you wanted to go for a drink with us before a game alcoholic or non, we all meet up before the games, and we welcome listeners to those meetups and encourage it as well. So just reach out to us on Twitter or send us an email, which is osospurs@gmail.com. Equally, you're welcome just to ping us or send us an email on there, and maybe you want to just come on the podcast and try it out for a distraction as a guest or whatever it is. Just reach out and ask, because we like doing all those kind of things. And if those kind of things, if that helps in any way, even if it doesn't help, it's just a way of giving a bit of fun to your week. We'd love to be a part of that. So, yeah. But thanks, Simon. We will hand you back to your wonderful family who we've stolen you from.
That's all right.
Thank you so much for coming on.
I'll just finish by saying it again with Dom. He has a deep lying need to prove to past clubs how good he is. So whether that's Chelsea and then he moved to Liverpool and then he never got into the Liverpool team, etc. He's had his season. Yes, it's been his best one, but he's got hunger and he wants to prove himself and he wants to get into that England team. So he wants to score goals. So you've got a good one. He might not be the number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5 when it comes to global strikers, but he ticks enormous boxes, as you've mentioned in this pod. I will leave you to the rest and wish you luck for the season, apart from when you play us.
Yes, likewise, Simon. Good luck.
Thanks, Simon. Nice to meet you, mate.
Good luck. Lovely to meet you, mate.
Yes.
All the best. Cheers.
Right, guys. Should we talk about Bayern Munich and Johnny back at the
Come
ground?
on, Johnny.
We're going to be back there all together soon. But Johnny,
Can't wait,
did you miss it? How was it? What was it like? Go on, tell us all.
Okay. So I'm gonna sort of try and just sort of, because you guys have seen the game, you had a better view watching on the screen when you're coming to talking about the passages of play, etc. There's not much I can add. But what I would say is that it's a pre-season game, so any pre-season game, and it's the one and only game we've had in our stadium before the season starts. The place is full, it's sold out, there's the usual frisson of excitement, but because it's not got the competitive edge, unless you count the Visit Malta Cup as something you're particularly aspiring to, then it's by nature of the fact that it's a game that, if you'd been organised and got your tickets sorted out in April, there's a lot of people at the game who wouldn't usually be there. A lot of people who are probably there for the first time, a lot more families, even though there's still quite a lot of families go to Tottenham games in general. There was probably a wider demographic than usual. I went with my daughter Aisling. She'd not been to the stadium since she was in primary school in her last year, and now she's going into second year in uni. So it was, I think, the year that we didn't lose at home was the last season in the lane before it got bulldozed. We were there together in the South Stand for Southampton. And so it's the first time she'd been there. So it was that kind of opportunity to bring the people who maybe don't normally go. We went to the Bricklayers before. It's the first time I've been to the Bricklayers for a while where I was able to actually get a beer because the queues weren't so bad. It was still absolutely rammed, but the dudes in the back garden and there's a few people trying to get the singing going, and they were, but it wasn't as rampant as usual, I would say. And then in the ground itself, we were in there quite a bit ahead, probably an hour and a half before kickoff. Had a pint, and the queues for the pizza were insane. The queues for the beer were way shorter than the queues for the pizzas and the chicken katsu burgers and all of the swanky foods that you get. So I think that sort of is an illustration of that kind of encapsulated the difference from a Premier League match. But it was a great occasion, beautiful sunny day. Obviously, there's the whole Kane Dyer backdrop, the whole Solanke just arriving and being announced. It was great. At the end of the warm-up, they had the presentation of Bergvall and Gray and Solanke in his suit, and they got their great Yido reception. And then Kane and Dyer had their presentation from Ledley of whatever cockerel memento in a box they got.
The key ring and
really
a piece
nice.
Of grass from the stadium.
I was genuinely pleased that, given that there was sometimes a little bit of a bad feeling, and even like we were kind of tongue-in-cheek talking about Eric Dyer and whoever the other fellow was the last time round. Kane got a properly good reception from the Spurs fans. Dyer played the whole second half. He was very good. He was very kind of charged up and ready to go. But when Kane came on, he got a brilliant reception, and it was what he deserved. It's what both of them deserved. And if they didn't hang around, we were flying off to go to something in the West End, so we did the quick run to White Hart Lane Station 5 minutes before the end. Like, so I wasn't there for Harry's tour of the pitch and clapping the fans or anything, but it was really really enjoyable. Bayern are seriously good. I mean, it might not have been their strongest team, but it was a proper test. And I think ultimately we were kind of masters of our own downfall, with the clear thing is the set pieces that were absolutely horrific.
Well, I wanted to ask you
two
on
goals
that, Johnny.
which were out. Yeah.
Is this, and I'm going to get serious talk now because we've had some nice happy talk about being back at the ground and the optimism, but is that a concern being at that game?
Yeah.
Or is it just a friendly in inverted commas? And Ange's comments, I want to add, after that were along the lines of, and I'm paraphrasing here in classic journalism style, taking things out of context, but I think it is within context of how he said it. Oh, I'm not too worried because our players are coming back from injury and the ones that were playing just probably weren't very familiar with each other. I'm like, massive alarm bells going off that. Even a Sam Allardyce who gets through being well-coached teams goes, I don't care what level of player you are, you get the fundamentals right. And that is a fundamental thing. You defend your back post properly, and we don't.
Yeah.
But have I answered your question?
Yeah,
with an answer.
Well, the two goals. The first goal, Upamecano, it was a free header at the back, and then the goal from Muller, the third one. It was the third. Yeah, he got the third one. It was even worse. And you got like Muller. Like, what is Muller famous for? Apart from yogurt, he's like, sticking the ball in the back of the net with his head. I mean, he's been doing it for like centuries, hasn't he? I don't know how old he is, but he's been there forever doing it for Germany, and it was really bad. I mean, it didn't employ his set piece, didn't bring in a set piece coach last season. And then when we had those issues last year, what you've just said in your little paraphrase, that's pretty much what you said last year too. And of course, there's a huge caveat of, well, those goals happened in the first half, and in the second half we had pretty much our starting defense back again. So we're not going to have the lineup that we had in the first half. But it is a bit of a concern. It's not like they've not been playing together. I know there's been changes and stuff with the back line, but even when I was coaching, it's like year 6 football in Riceland, like 25 years ago. You practice free kicks. You practice both defending and attacking free kicks and working out really basic stuff, like having somebody on the back post and figuring out who the danger man is from the opposition. So that to me is a big alarm bell. But Ange's Ange, so it doesn't compute to me that he's totally chilled about set pieces. And you think of how hard you have to work to get a goal, and then you're giving away goals so cheaply. It's amazingly frustrating. So I am a bit worried about it. I mean, I guess when you've got the four that we've been used to, who are a top quality defense with the keeper, I know he had a clanger for the second goal with the pass. You'd have a lot more confidence, and maybe as Simon was saying there, when you've got the likes of Dom Solanke in there doing what Kane used to do with the defense. Kane was superb at those defending those set pieces, the corners and free kicks. So there's obviously, it's not like we're absolutely down in the dumps about it. But it is obviously got to be something we've got to really attend to. Yeah.
Just if you don't know how to fix it, bring in someone who does. Like, Andy's really good at entrusting other people. That's what frustrates me. It's like he seems like the type. He's not a micromanager. He trusts people. You'd think he'd go, I'm employing someone who's very good at that, and I'm just going to tell them to fix it and not fixate on it myself and then get on with my job. But I'm going to always lean on the side of trusting him.
Yes.
I have a little thing to say about this. I think we kind of breezed over this, but like if you look at the starting lineup, we had one person who I trust to head a ball in the starting lineup. We had Dragusin. That's it. Our other center back, Ben Davies. I do not trust him to win a duel. I do not trust Jed Spence to win a duel in the air. I do not trust Pedro Porro to win a duel in the air. I did not trust any of our midfielders to win a duel in the air, and I did not trust any of our forwards to win a duel in the air. On the opening day of the season, we will have 2 center backs who I trust to win a duel in the air, and hopefully Dom Solanke or Richarlison. By going from 1 to 3 people who you trust to win a duel in the air, that fixes a lot of problems. Especially because the second goal was basically Kulusevski's fault, because he was the one who missed played the duel in the air because he's not good at those. But that's not going to be him week 1. That's going to be Solanke, or that's going to be Richarlison, hopefully. And if we have that player instead, that goal doesn't go in. Like, it just doesn't. He doesn't get all turned around, and he doesn't let Muller get free at the back post. So for as much as this is an ongoing issue and it's something that I wish we could put behind us, I do think that it is important to, one, look at how we played most of last season without an aerial threat, which, for as big of a deal as that was offensively, it was even bigger of a deal defensively. And we will not be doing that anymore. Because, like, realistically, our issues with set pieces started with Harry Kane leaving, because we were all used to, like, setting him up at the front post or wherever, and he would just win the header. If the ball came within like a 3-foot circle of him, he wins that header. And that's the kind of player that someone like Dom Solanke can do for you, not just on offense, but on defense as well, because he has an above average number of clearances for a forward, according to FBref. And I can tell you he's not getting most of those with his feet. So that leaves you with one option. He's a very good header of the ball. He uses his height well to do stuff like that. And that's something that will help, if not solve completely, at least help alleviate the concerns that we have about set pieces, hopefully. So I understand the concerns, but I'm way more in favor of saying this is a preseason game. We had one player who can win a duel in the air on the field. That will not be the case at any point during the season unless we have an injury crisis.
Okay, so it's not all doom and gloom. Deej, you've made me feel a little bit better. But I still feel, and I'm going to say Ange is amazing, and I love him, but we could still prepare knowing those players aren't in that box to.
I think Deej is absolutely right in what he said, but both of the headers, they weren't even competed. Like, Muller was in yards of space, Gnabry was in a lot of space, or Upamecano was in a lot of space. So, like, it's a completely fair point. The personnel on the pitch at that point isn't going to be the personnel we're going to have on the pitch typically, unless we got some horrendous kind of combination of injuries. But it was, just given the level of the opposition, it was really naive defending. Doesn't matter who you've got in the park. It was pure crap. It really was.
Sorry, go on, mate.
Yeah, and I think, Ange's point is I don't think he's necessarily blasé about set pieces, because I think, he's so detailed in every other part of his play, he won't be blasé about set pieces. But his point is that the coaches that look after that part of the pitch should be good enough to deal with that, and he's not going to have a set piece specialist that's going to look at attacking and defending set pieces. He's going to let those coaches deal with it, which I get. We might not totally agree with that, and we might think that there's actually a specialist coaching role, but I think he looks at it more holistically, and he says, I'm not going to bring somebody in just for that. So I sort of get what he's saying as well, and I think Deej's points are really good. If you've got 3 decent headers of the ball back and if you've got Solanke towards that front post, a 6'2" fella to get over, who's a good jumper of the ball, that actually causes you a lot of problems because you can't get the ball down in the middle of the 6-yard box then, So it adds a lot of stuff for us.
Right, boys. Well, we are going to be doing another pod on Friday, hopefully. I don't know. We'll figure out. It might be a larger audience, but we're going to have a special guest on then. We're going to have a Leicester podcaster on called Wayne, who's going to help us preview that game. And then, roll on the season. It's going to be a busy one. I've got 7 guests lined up in the first 2 months for us. So exciting times. So
busy boy.
Names include Big John Bass, Holly's Hotspurs, Tottenham Simpsons. There's many more, and I've definitely wish I hadn't started that because now I feel bad for not being able to rattle off the other ones. But I won't give away anymore. There's lots more.
Teaser.
Yeah, teaser. Yeah, one rhymes with Mally Mould. No, he said no. We did ask him. But up the Spurs, boys. And
go on, you Spurs.
Yeah, roll on the season. Oh, actually, before we finish, quick one, guys. You've got to predict our top goal scorer and number of goals and our league position. You can't waste time justifying it. Just player name, number of goals, and end league position of the coming
number
season.
Of goals for the player or for the team?
For the player. So our top goal scorer with number of goals and our end league position. You can't put too much justification behind it, though. Go, Si.
Well, Golden Boot winner Solanke on 28, with us finishing 4th.
Johnny, go on.
Okay, I'm going to be glass half full and say 3rd. I think it depends on Slot and Liverpool, but I'm going to go 3rd, and I'm obviously going to go Solanke. I'm going to say 24.
Deej.
I'm going to say 3rd. I'll go with Solanke. Actually, I'll mix it up a little bit. I think it'll be Solanke, but I'll say Son, just because I don't want everyone to say the same thing. That feels a bit boring. And I'll say he'll tie his season. I'll say he gets 23 in the Prem.
Cool. All right, I'll go 22 goals from Solanke. Actually, no, he's not going to win Golden Boot with that. 24 goals with Solanke. And we're going to finish.
24. Gets him way over the line for that Golden Boot, doesn't it?
Exactly.
We're going to finish third.
Haaland's never going to get more than 23.
Actually, we're going to win the league, right? I'm going to give you a reason why. Here we go. We would have finished third, but in January, Man City get hit with, February, they get hit with a massive points deduction. We're now looking at second place. Arsenal, their knees start to tremble at the top of the table. They can't handle the pressure of us breathing down their necks. They
Arsenal's
utterly
never bottled
implode.
it before. So that's
Heung-min Son, final game of the season. We are drawing, and it's one of those Aguero moments outside the box. He ends his career of Spurs by lifting the Premier League trophy as captain, scoring the winner, and we win the league.
And then Jim
there
wakes up.
Yeah, so
exactly.
that's what I spend my night dreaming about. Back in the room. And we'll probably come fourth.
Yeah.
But anyway, up the Spurs, boys. Roll on the
Come on,
season.
you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs.